these thoughts are going through your head and you ain't made it to the therapist yet. Hi, I want to talk about mental health and why is it that black people still aren't going to therapy? And I say that from a place of like, well, hold on. I'm a black person and I identify as such. Of course, with the knowledge of the Moors and all that stuff, leave me alone. I know the word autochthonous, leave me alone. And I thought to myself, okay, well, it was hard for me to actually embrace therapy. And I really did it because I was in a position where either I was going to go to therapy or I was not going to graduate from my dream college. So I want to talk about the reasons why I feel. Forget statistics, I tried looking those up. Forget all the research, trust me, I did that. I decided to come from my perspective. And so this is what I think. One, of course, it's an economic situation, right? Um, you, this idea that you can't afford it, right? You can't afford it, you can't pay for it, it's too expensive. And I do know, I've been in positions where your insurance does not pay for it all, and I'm dishing out $75 a pop. Now, of course, when you're in college, it's actually free, so you go there for free, but you also don't get essentially maybe the highest quality of therapists. You might meet people who are in their residency or they're actually going through their essentially getting their credits, right, to fully complete. So they're more like students, and there might be a few professionals, but you know what I mean. People who are still learning. And so then you have that. So there's the money aspect of it all. I know for me, I'll cut that out right away. I found that when I really, really want to do something, the money comes. And you have to admit, that's probably true for a lot of people. I mean, even for people who are drug addicted, somehow that money comes. You find a way. So I really, really wanted to get therapy, so the money came. So I'll leave that one out. But what are the other factors? There's so many to me. So I'm just going to name as many as I can. One, I found it's the fear of finding the right therapist. So you know you need help, but you're afraid to find someone who actually, if you're going to be able to find someone that can help you. And the truth is that my first therapist sucked. There was a few different issues, especially when it comes to being black. There was colorism. This woman happened to be dark skinned. I didn't know if that would be a factor. I was definitely concerned about the idea. Does she have any issues with colorism? Will she want to help me? Right? Will she have this sense of not being as committed to my wellness and healing as she would to someone who looks closer to her, who has a complexion more like her, who maybe she can actually relate to more? So that was one aspect, just the colorism, because sometimes it's all about, we have this idea of, okay, well, we want a therapist that's black, but that's scary as well if you factor in that there may be some colorist issues within that whole situation. Will I get the help that I need? That was a question. And then while we're on the subject of skin color, will a white therapist be able to relate to me? Will they be able to actually help me? That was a concern. Now we get to being a woman. Will a heterosexual man, be able to help me? Will he be serious and committed? Will he be full of ethics, or will he lose his ethics? What if he becomes attracted to me? Will he actually be professional there? Am I able to be vulnerable to someone who may not be dealing with me in a professional way? So there's that concern. Then we also have the issue of any level of fetishism when it comes to working with a male, fetishism or attraction, depending on the route it could go. So you, in the back of your mind, you know you're dealing with human beings. So there's that fear as well. So finding the right person who can relate, not just on what you're experiencing, but also the cultural aspect of things. We have different problems culturally, right? We know that we have a sense of PTSD. And if in our families, historically, we don't get help, and usually the church has been the only way, it means that there's a lot of different issues. For example, something that a real life example, when I went to a therapist and I explained a work environment, right away they were like, whoa, that's a very toxic environment, and they acknowledged my feelings. Now if I said that to the older black women in my life, they'd be like, yeah, that's what happens. So we don't really know when there's a problem a lot of times, so therefore sometimes we don't know when we need to get help. So if I'm feeling depressed, I know I'm feeling depressed, I know I need to get help. But if I speak to essentially like the older community would be like, yeah, we all have our bad days. But no, 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 I'm having like bad days every day. We have our bad days. So we don't necessarily know when we need support, because when we go to our elders, they don't necessarily know how to support us in that unless they're versed. So there's also this lack of education and trust in actually getting help, and that gets passed down. So there's that. Now we don't know who can help us, who's going to help us, how they're going to help us, and if they're going to be genuine. And then there's the fear of medicine and taking medicine. So sometimes we don't associate. I remember almost hearing psychiatrists and psychologists being said interchangeably, not realizing there was a difference. That a psychiatrist, of course, can prescribe meds and a psychologist doesn't. So there was a fear before I went in that the moment I go to meet a therapist, they're going to want to put me on meds. And I was afraid of being on medication, afraid to try. What does that mean? And honestly, I did feel like the repercussions of that, because I did try the medication because I was trying to graduate college. And that was really important to me. So I was willing to do whatever I needed to do to help me get over that hump. But it was very hard to share that with my family. Like, I'm on these meds. I really wanted support in it, but it was like, you taking psychotropic drugs. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So, I had to tune all that out. Now, if that was my family, a pretty educated family, you know, what are other people hearing, right? Is it as, because in our community, it's okay to smoke weed, it's okay to drink, but actually take a medication or a pill, it's not as accepted. And there's also the strong person vibe, right? Being a strong Black woman. I kind of hinted to it before, but it's hard to know when you are being too strong and when you actually need help. Um, it adds to it that when you actually do get into therapy, I know I felt almost competitive about it. Like, I couldn't go into it and just be so at it. I had to be great at therapy. Like, what? Like, I'm already thinking that in my mindset. So it's really hard to be vulnerable, to open up and get to the root things when you're trying to like boss out therapy. Like, there's something that's going to get in the way of that. I think another factor is this, and it goes back to the idea of not knowing when to get help, and that is a lot of us have I don't know if you were raised this way, but I know I was raised this way, that my A is essentially going to be considered a C. And then of course a white person C is an A to them. So meaning I'm never, in the world of race and politics, I have to work twice as harder and much harder than a white person does. And so this feeling that I always have to work hard, and work harder and harder and harder, it puts this idea that somehow I'm built to do that. So if I'm having a problem, I don't want to be seen as weak. It also means that in the competitive world, of work world, schooling world, I don't want to be seen as weak. So if I say out loud that I need help, then I'm already behind these white peers. I'm already behind. And that's psychology through it. So now, how are you supposed to go and get help when you already feel behind by who dominates the field? Mostly white therapists. So now I got to go admit to the people that in my mind that I'm already trying to up the, hey, I need your help, when it's racism and all this stuff that has me in this position in the first place. It's like, where do you run? And then if you're like, okay, well, I want to run to the people who look like me, now I got to deal with colorism. Are they going to really help me? I don't doubt their intelligence, and I don't doubt that they earn their spot and they have the knowledge and education, but can I trust them for real, for real? So there's a trust issue with all of that. So there's trust that we have in general, because then we also have this idea that and this sucks, but when Black people have reached certain levels of education, they're sellouts. Sellout meaning they may not be in tune to what we might consider to be the struggle. And so you may not trust that person. Like, are they really for the people? Am I really going to be able to like lay my burdens down to you for real, for real? Or have you sold out? I thought I was supposed to know everything. Then trying to find a therapist and going through the process was really hard. I had to try to like read read all the profiles, and all that became kind of exhausting and made me feel like, oh, I don't want to do it. I was ashamed. I was ashamed that I needed help. It was really hard to shake. I wasn't supposed to need help. I was the one helping. So if you think about just the economics of just black people in general, you don't have a lot of wealthy people. It's like only 3% of us, and there's only 13% of us here, in the States, apparently, right? According to the census, and we don't take the census, so there's probably more. But with those numbers of what they are able to count and collect, then you also have to factor in that a lot of us, if there's just a small percentage that really do experience wealth, then that means you are middle class or even at the poverty line. And what kind of jobs do you have? You have jobs that are typically in service too. So whether you are working at a fast food restaurant, whether you are a server, a caregiver, these kinds of jobs don't pay a lot. But it's not just about how much they pay, it's also about the mind state you're in. You're typically the one who's always helping. And unfortunately, because you're always helping, it's hard to get out of that mind state that now you need help, and that there are people who are supposed to be in service to you for a fee, but still that you need help because you have been so used to being the helper. It's hard to actually make that shift. So I think that's a cultural shift. And I have to think about it. Almost everyone in my family has been in a helping stage, whether in education, whether even doctors. Doctors have a hard time um, getting help sometimes because they're so used to providing it. So when you're in that space of service, and so many of us are, it's hard to receive the help that we need because we are used to being the masters or the most knowledgeable people about service. Then there's just not knowing. You don't know what is the training? How have they been trained? I think if we understood what the training entailed, we might feel safer and more prone to reach out because you know what's available. We also don't realize that there's so many different therapies that you can use. And so if you know about the therapies, then you can actually maybe find a specialist that works in that field and you feel more empowered. But a lot of it's lack of education. We don't even know that there's more therapies because maybe some of us really don't want to just sit and talk. There are other ways to have a therapeutic experience and help yourself mentally. And we're also afraid of the diagnosis and afraid of the label. Nobody wants a label. I don't want the label. You don't want to be labeled as this and that. But the truth is that the label actually helps you understand certain behaviors and puts you in a better sense of ownership and power, and you can actually do more with that. But without the label, sometimes it's really hard to know what's going on. Culturally, we're used to not labeling. We won't put our, we know we see something weird about our family members and the kids, and we don't say anything. We just treat them like normal. And sometimes it works really, really well, and other times you just grow up and you're like, well, they're a little touched. But if you sometimes allow the diagnosis, you can get ahead of some things and actually be better at life. But if you don't find out what the issue is, it can be pretty difficult to navigate life. Fear of what am I going to find out the moment I do open up? There's a fear of the unknown. Will you uncover a memory? What's going to happen? Because deep down, when you do know that maybe I need to go to a therapist, there's a fear that your deep feelings might actually come out, things that you don't think you're ready for. But that's the place to do it. You're with a therapist, and that's the safest place to explore those feelings. All these thoughts are going through your head, and you ain't made it to the therapist yet. All these thoughts were going through my head before I actually made it. So my first therapy run was with that woman. I didn't trust her. I didn't think she liked me. I felt like she thought it was a joke. Sometimes I thought she was smirking. Now this could have been me and what I was going through, but also it does take time to find a good therapist. Truthfully, the best therapy experience I had, she happened to be a white woman. But I think that for me, the buzzwords that she had was the first thing she said when I came in there was, "You can heal. I want you to know, I know you can heal." When I heard that, I was like, all right, she's about this. But that was what made me feel like I can do this. And I kind of released all those things that were flowing through my mind, like what I just shared with you. It all went away and I was able to do the work. Not everybody has that experience from their first therapist. I didn't have it from my first therapist. So it's something that you actually have to put the work in. And I guess the message that I have is that if you are hesitant, if you're not quite sure, I will admit it's not easy. You have to overcome all those thoughts and those things, but it is worth it in the end. So don't give up on finding help and seeking help. And it is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of strength. And also, read and research. It helped me a lot to start researching different things that I was experiencing. And the more I researched it and found out, hold up, this isn't normal behavior, then I knew that these were the things I need to get help for. So I would also suggest you do that. So, hallelujah, hallelujah magic, you and Bunia. And I do hope you find a therapist for you if it's something that you realize it's time to do.